Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the CWP YouTube channel. You might recognize my face at this point. You'll definitely recognize the handsome mofo to my right. Of course, I am Aaron Nix, host of WrestlePlug, who, of course, work in conjunction with CWP. We brought you the pre-show and the review of Reborn, and now we're going to try and bring you something a little bit different, some extra content to keep you tied over until the next event. Of course, this is the wonderful MC of CWP that is Magic Martin Rowe. Welcome back to the podcast, sir.
It's great to be back to the podcast, and a very Merry Christmas to you and to all of the fans of CWP.
Yes, indeed. Merry Christmas, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you have good tidings and whatnot. And we're obviously going to be available. I also recognize some people are alone at Christmas or find it difficult to socialize. CWP social media channels are always open. Plenty of content now on the YouTube channel as well, which will hopefully help pass the time. But if you are really struggling, please don't hesitate to reach out, speak to loved ones, family, friends, that kind of thing. But CWP will also be available at a time that is not always wonderful for everybody. And we appreciate that here at WrestlePlug and CWP. Now then, it's time for somewhat of a list podcast. Myself and Magic Martin Rowe have written down, as you can see from the title of this video, 5 individuals that we believe could break out in 2022 for CWP in particular, as they, of course, move forward with more shows. And we hopefully might have some juicy gossip at the end of the podcast for you as well, if you decide to stick around that long. Magic Martin Rowe 2022 is going to be hopefully a big year for CWP, coming off the back of the Reborn show, getting back into the swing of things. As you know, it takes a lot of time and effort to build that head of steam up again. 2022, you must be a very positive man looking forward to that year.
I'm very much looking forward to 2022, but I think it's definitely going to be a year of change for CWP because one of the things that has unfortunately happened is an extended period of time between title opportunities, which means that there are some people who may have fallen by the wayside. They may have given up wrestling altogether. And we're in a situation now where I'm of the opinion, obviously I'm not a booker, I'm not in charge of the pencil or anything at CWP, but I believe that there is an opportunity now for us to refresh the company, to make some titles vacant, and for maybe even some title tournaments or some, #1 contenders matches, and really rejuvenate with a brand new generation of wrestlers at CWP.
Yeah, I have some honorable mentions as well of people that I think might fit into that bracket, because right now, as anyone has been paying attention on social media will know, we currently have, in some ways, brand new tag team champions. Unfortunately, Roderick the Rambunctious buried his half of the tag team titles. I assume in an undisclosed location, looked a little bit like Southsea, but I can't confirm that because I don't follow him around, thankfully. But at the same time, that means that obviously people will have seen Buff Daddy has stepped into that role as tag team partner with the founding father of CWP, Robbie Nitro. But not only that, we also have a vacant women's title, which is unfortunate. And that, of course, is something that we really want to take pride in. Myself, personally, I'm very passionate about women's wrestling and making sure that it's afforded time and a schedule, because we have one of the strongest scenes in Britain, regardless of the amount of people who move on to greener pastures or more mainstream pastures in NXT UK and the like. We've still got an astonishing scene that's ready to go, and it would be criminal not to shine a light on that. And of course, there is also rumblings of a brand new mid-card belt coming in, for better or for worse, depending on how you want to look at it. There has been discussions of the possibility of something like a county championship, something around that region that could only be defended, by somebody. And that's a good idea, because what that does is that might potentially bring in more localized talent, homegrown talent, grassroots, if you will. So I like the sound of your concept. Now, I've ranked my individuals 5 to 1, but obviously there's no particular preference. If Mr. Rowe hasn't done that, then he doesn't have to either. It's his 5. He can choose to name who he wishes. Martin Rowe, who's the first person you'd like to mention on your agenda for a breakout start of 2022?
Okay, it's more than a star. We're talking stars here, because I think that you and me will agree that if there's one thing that is going to be everywhere in British wrestling in 2022, it's knobs. No matter where you look in British wrestling, you're going to see some knobs. Knobs are going to be exploding all over the British wrestling scene.
Yes, there will be. It's going to be hard to handle knobs, particularly in CWP. I think that they have quite an illustrious glow about them. They have a bit of a sheen about them, they do, the knobs. And of course, Martin Rowe is referring to the incredible faction of delightful, nasty old boys that is Ebenezer the Geezer, Dirty Dave Dennis, and sensational Simon Durden. And there are some rumblings that, some people have seen on social media that Eddie Kenway has dabbled a little bit with the knobs. You've seen wearing a t-shirt. It's out there, so there's no point us trying to pretend it hasn't happened. We saw Eddie Kenway wearing an incredibly tight-fitted t-shirt, as to be said. How do you find a t-shirt for a massive man like that? Let's be real. Custom-made suit and everything that he is. And of course, Eddie Kenway, we're going to probably be discussing people who could potentially have a shot at him, including individuals actually in this faction. So there might be some infighting at some point over who can go after singles titles. But one thing I love about them is the potential of a Freebird scenario, because you do have a multitude of people. And what did I say on the last opportunity we had to speak? Tag team division suffering immensely.
We're in an interesting situation at the moment where we haven't really got very many factions going on within. There was the brand war between the Outcast team from the Isle of Wight and CWP's Homegrown Faithful. But since the disbanding of the takeover, it may be a situation, maybe it's a power grab, the power vacuum. It could be a time for the knobs to move up and maybe state their dominance. The knobs are an interesting bunch because they're all geezers. They're all lads. They're all a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Are they good guys? Are they bad guys? Maybe it's time for them to, state their allegiance, flip the coin, decide what side of the bracket they fall, maybe.
Yeah, there's what I like about the knobs is the danger factor of them, because like you say, they're all geezers, but they have different qualities. Ebenezer is a hustler. Ebenezer, the full-time, he's full-time for a reason, this geezer, because he's a hustler, he's a wheelie dealer, he's your classic salesman of sorts. He'll wangle his way into anything he can. Now, of course, Dirty Dave Dennis, dirty by name, dirty by nature. Very, very dirty boy indeed, Mr. Dennis. And of course, he brings the title with him. And whether you consider that belt to be divisive or not, and it's certainly upset quite a few salty old people online, the reality is that it also offers an excellent distraction if you're looking to partake in other activities or maybe chase down other titles. And then, of course, Sensational Simon, don't be fooled by the lovely smile and the gentleman-like demeanor. He's a knob for a reason. You don't get to be a knob unless you are nefarious in some ways. And that's the thing with Simon. He's very charming. And he presents himself as a non-threat. You think, oh, Simon Durden, a lovely guy. He's sensational. What could he possibly do to hurt me? And then, of course, while your back's turned, right hook square to the back of your head. And, he takes advantage of it. He's a very smart man. Some qualities I have to admire, it has to be said. But it's a good choice. What would you rather see the knobs doing in 2022? Would you like to see them separate themselves, spread themselves across the brand, or would you like to see them stay as a unit, pack mentality?
Well, as you were mentioning earlier, the tag team scene in CWP is in a real weird state of flux right now. Because although, yes, Buff Daddy, who came back out of retirement, is back in the British wrestling game and looking in fantastic condition, I've got to say. He's tagging with Robbie Nitro as they're now Buff Nation. Is that what they're called?
Buff Nation. Yeah. So they've even kind of taken some of, to be fair as well, we didn't mention the fact that Robbie Nitro, who of course everyone knows is also the founding father of CWP, he had a rebuttal towards Roderick and he seemed a little bit, frankly betrayed and upset about the whole concept. And obviously we have to see whether that's going to affect Robbie's mentality going forward. But from my personal experience, from what I've seen, this was probably needed, and frankly he may have done Robbie a favor, because I think Buff Daddy, incredibly seasoned veteran, a guy who's been across the circuit, a guy who has wrestled with some incredible talents. Don't forget, Buff Daddy holds one of the distinctions of wrestling one of the biggest matches CWP has ever offered when he took on Impact Wrestling superstar Bram, who also was in NXT for quite some time as well. So that's an upgrade in experience. But I want to see whether the Knobs are going to take it upon themselves to interject in the tag team scene, because right now, if you take away Buff Nation, who is there really available in this tag team division?
And I've got to say, I personally think that at the moment, you can't call Buff Nation the tag team champions. It's still a disputed title, in my opinion, until they successfully defend their championships or even win a final contenders match. They're still a disputed champions. They're not undisputed champions right now. In my opinion, I would love to see Buff Nation go against Roderick and a partner. So that way we can decide once and for all who takes control of both halves of the championship. But then again, you know, if Buff Nation can successfully defend their titles against the Knobs, if they could successfully defend against one of many fantastic tag teams around the UK today, if you can defend your championships, you are the champions. And there's no word in that. There's no disputing that.
Yeah, my final point would be obviously that they did make their debut as a tag team, wrestling at ACW, dispatching the, frankly, quite nefarious pairing of Danny Disorder and Brandon Lee, who no doubt we'll see again at some point. They also made surprise appearances at the CWP Rumble at Reborn as well. So they're not completely alien to our audience at this point. Danny Disorder particularly sees himself as the hardest man in Bournemouth. Not really sure what that means, because I've been to Bournemouth, and with all due respect, not many hard men running around there. So not sure how proud you are of your title, sir, but it is what it is. And you know, who am I to dispute it? I'm not from Bournemouth. So if we can find an old age pensioner that'll slap you around with a Zimmer frame of sorts, we'll get to that point. But you know, yes, they did win that tag team title match, well, tag team match, excuse me. But like you say, it wasn't for the titles, and it wasn't on CWP's ground as well. And it'd be interesting to see whether fans take to this new direction or not as well, because they still see themselves as fan favorites and they still want to play to the audience. However, there is no denying the audience had a very special place for Roderick the Rambunctious. But at the same time, we have to remember Roderick chose to leave his half of the tag team titles in the sand. He wasn't forced out of the company whatsoever. He's made a choice. And ultimately, we'll see how that goes. Now, the first name on my list, you mentioned Outcast. That's quite apropos. You were very high on this guy during our review of the show, and certainly so was I. Unfortunately, he suffered an injury, and it looks like he might require surgery. I believe he'll probably be stripped to the championship unless he can obviously return fairly quickly from surgery. I'm referring to the retro dude, Rudy Root. I love this guy. He looks $1 million, like you said. And also something about Rudy Root, other than obviously his association with Jackson Arrow at times, he seems to be a little bit more of a straightforward, straight shooting kind of guy. Seems a little bit more honest. He's not as nefarious. A lot of the Outcast guys are very, you know, grubby. They like that too. They're dirty. You know, look at Kane the Virus, somebody who I actually have a lot of admiration for. I really like him, but you know, he's going to stab you in the back. Rudy Root seems much more honest. He seems much more keen to please an audience. And I think that is why, for me, he's the guy from Outcast that most fits the bill to work more regularly in CWP, and particularly in 2022, if he is, of course, fit, which would be a real shame if he's not, because he's just starting to build up steam, just starting to show the world, really, what he can do. He's got a great looking, well, he wouldn't call it a gimmick. He'd say it was a lifestyle, so we'll go with that. But he's also an incredibly prime athlete. Ripped to the gills, great look, great atmosphere, great attitude, great aura, great talker as well. Can talk his way into a lot of different things, but he does it in a stand-up manner. So I wanted to give Rudy Root a little bit of time and luxury on this podcast. And he looks like somebody who may possibly have the key to unlock the conundrum that is the No Limits Championship, which is now over 1,100 days and counting, held by Eddie Kenway.
Rudy Root is a very cool guy. not just the way he looks, the way he moves, but he's a guy that is a marketable wrestler. He's the kind of person that you can put on a poster front and center with his laser beam sunglasses, and he's different. He attracts attention. He's the kind of guy that makes you go, I'm going to pay good money to see that guy. So, maybe, he could be, one of the few people from Outcast that maybe we have a good working relationship with, because, for so long, they were a company that were all about taking down CWP. Maybe it's time to, better the devil in that sense.
Yes, indeed. Who's next on your list, sir?
Right. Now, at the very start of the show, I mentioned that we have a situation where we've got a lot of vacant titles at the moment. Now, I went back through some old tapes, and I believe that the last CWP women's champion was Elisa Sorrow, if I remember rightly. She was a wrestler who had been training at the London School of Lucha Libre, which is where people like Clementine and Will Ospreay and a lot of really good wrestlers have come through the London School of Lucha. And as far as I'm aware, she may not be wrestling at the moment. I took a look on her social medias. There's not a lot going on there. So as far as I'm aware, the championship is vacant. Now, at that last match, it was originally the champion was Skye Smitson. Now, as we know, Skye Smitson never lost the title. She just wasn't able to make the show, and she was stripped of the belt. Skye Smitson is, in my opinion, the best unsigned talent in the UK today, male or female. The fact that she hasn't been signed yet by NXT UK is shocking to me, because she has got all the credentials she needs to be a superstar in this business. And in my opinion, if they're going to have a tournament or a multi-woman scramble to declare a new CWP women's champion, if Skye Smitson is not in the ring, that is a travesty. I think she may not be the next champion, but she needs to be in the contention, because she was not single-handed. There were some great women's wrestlers in CWP over the years. Bobby Tyler, who is now in NXT UK as Stevie Turner, and of course the wonderful Zan Phoenix, who was recently retired from wrestling. But Skye Smitson is still on the scene. She is at the very top of her game. And I think it's time for Skye Smitson to reclaim her crown as the head of the women's division in CWP.
I'm really pleased you mentioned that, because number 4 on my list is Skye Smitson, which is phenomenal. And there is a good reason for that, because in my opinion, she is the best women's wrestler in Europe, period. I think she's better than everybody else. I believe her mentality, I believe her work rate, her work ethic, her style, her look, her passion, and frankly, her disregard for rules is thrilling. Absolutely thrilling. I know Skye reasonably well. I would push forward enough to say that she's actually a friend of mine, a very close friend, and I love what she does. And you cannot talk about any women's wrestling in CWP without mentioning Skye Smitson first. She is in many ways not technically, but in somewhat, I would say, the first lady of CWP in that regard, the first woman of CWP. But there's representation, which is important as well to her, and I know it's important to us. And for me, like you mentioned, Mercedes Blaze should also go on that list, an incredible talent who's now starting to really shine. Progress Wrestling had an NXT UK trial herself. But you're correct in saying it's criminal that Skye Smitson is not on a mainstream roster right now, but their loss is obviously still our gain. Skye Smitson, by the way, can still be seen working for a multitude of companies like World War Wrestling. She's going to be featuring in a WXW tour soon as well. And as you know, that is premium quality wrestling from Germany. That's where Volta cut his teeth. That is where Timothy Thatcher made a name for himself. There is a multitude of it, including the NXT Tag Team Champions Imperium as well. They cut their teeth in WXW as well. WXW is a big deal. And Skye walks into wherever she is. She's also Pro Wrestling Eve, one of their highest level talents, and that is undoubtedly Europe's finest all-women's division in wrestling. She walks in, she slaps people in the face, and she does what she wants to do. And absolutely unstoppable talent. I frankly think it's disappointing that we haven't seen her in CWP for a while. I know she's been busy. I know it's difficult to lock down dates, but if you're in charge of CWP, and we obviously know who's kind of making decisions back there, if you do not bring in Sky Smithson, when you obviously will be recrowning a women's champion very soon, you are frankly doing yourself a monstrous disservice. And also, you're really neglecting and strangle holding the crowd from seeing a truly world-class talent. How much longer is it going to be before Sky Smithson just isn't available to any of us but the big green monster that is Vinnie Mac's machine?
Now, there are 3 more names that I'm going to put as honourable mentions, because in my opinion, the rebirth of the CWP women's division has to be one of our priorities in 2022. And two other names that are, in my opinion, need to be part of that women's tournament or women's scramble. Firstly is Rebel Kinney, the leading lady of Lucha. That's not actually strictly true. She's the leading lesbian of Lucha, or the Psycho Dyke. She's a very, very violent woman. And she's currently the Solent Wrestling Federation Women's Champion. I was there when she was crowned champion against the Deadly Nightshade. Now, both of those are fantastic women's wrestlers. I don't know if you're aware of Nightshade.
I am.
Absolutely beautiful, Red Queen, violent woman, with some size to her. She's not as big as the likes of Dewdrop. What was Viper, Piper Niven, but she's got some size to her. But she comes out and she holds herself like a queen in the ring. And there was a time when women's wrestling was a little bit powder puff. These women do not hold back. They full force, and it's fantastic to watch. And when we're talking about dominant forces in women's wrestling, I think we're going to have to talk about the notorious angel, Amber Joe. She is at the very, very start of her career, but in the time that she's been in the ring, she's had 1 solo match and she's already won a championship. I mean, when did a debuting diva win a championship since Paige? I mean, you're talking a woman who is currently, she just recently been rated in the QWI 200 of the top LGBT wrestlers in the world at the moment. And I think that 2022 could be the year that the notorious angel really does become a breakout star in British wrestling.
Yeah, I love those honourable mentions. Nightshade, unfortunately injured right now with a broken ankle, which is, Nightshade was actually scheduled to face the notorious Amber Joe at Immortal Wrestling for the Women's Championship in a freeway with Bunny Mallow. Nightshade, of course, got injured. Bunny Mallow, unfortunately, contracted COVID, which left Amber Joe to, credit to her. She went out there and had a highly credible match with an entirely different individual. I believe she faced the junior heavyweight champion of Immortal, or it may have been the cruiserweight champion. They're pretty much the same thing. Sorry, guys, but they are. Someone's got to tell you that, because nobody else seems to be doing it. But hey, fair play. If you've got enough lightweights there to go at it, you can have 2 belts. All the more power to you. And of course, shout out to Joe Lando, Kelly Six, and a number of guys going to war for those belts. Very impressive roster. So Amber Joe, being able to get on that roster alone shows a lot of credibility. Great physique as well. My critique of her would be sloppy. Particularly in ring. And I mean that from the sense of wayward, a little bit too haphazard. And that comes with youth, that comes with inexperience. You got to make sure that you are more on, I sort of measure it akin to a boxer. You've got to be accurate in your striking, in your offensive nature. And if you're not, you will be punished by veterans in this business. And that might stifle her growth a little bit. But in terms of potential, unlimited. Absolutely unlimited. I'd also like to throw in Mia Cortez. Some people may not necessarily know her as well. They will do, I can assure you of that. She is a veteran now at this point, almost 10 years, I believe, in the business, the Dragon Empress. And she has an astonishing ability to change personality. She has masks that quite eerie, quite unsettling. Those who are more familiar with our friends over at Independent Wrestling Elite will get to see her quite frequently via their YouTube channel. Highly recommend you do so. They've just had a complete overhauling of it. It looks great, and they're uploading brand new matches, including Mia Cortez challenging Riley Daniels for the Women's Championship in that company, and that was an excellent example of what Mia Cortez can do. And I have noticed that she is working a number of new companies and different places that she didn't last year. She's really stepping up her game, and she wants everyone to know what she's about. But there's no doubt that the women's division, it just looks exceptional, and it should be given the time it deserves. Who's number 3 on your list, sir?
Okay, this is an interesting one. I think that this is, again, a year when the belts come back, and it's all about that CWP middleweight championship. I'm not sure who the last champion was. It was either Roderick or it might have been Buff Daddy Johnny Rocket.
I believe it was merged, wasn't it? Wasn't it merged with the No Limit? It might have been, or it may have. I think it was merged with the heavyweight title or the No Limits title. I can't remember, but it was definitely merged, if I remember rightly. But it's no longer in existence as we speak.
Okay, because I think that this is the time for CWP to really bolster their cruiserweight division. What we saw at the last show, at the a little bit in the multi-man scramble, it gave us glimpses. It gave us glimpses of that new talent, that new generation of high-flying superstar that is coming through the ranks. And I think it's time to showcase them, maybe in their own division, maybe their own championship. But Aaron Cruz, it's time for him to really show the world what he's all about.
Yeah, Aaron Cruz is on my list. He's actually number 1. And the reason for that, so we'll just go straight into it, because why waste time and why double up on it when we can just both talk about it right now? Aaron Cruz, for me, has a terrifying amount of potential. He looks akin to a Will Ospreay. He looks akin to a multitude of really high quality wrestlers. He somewhat reminds me in some ways of an extraordinarily young, maybe naive in some ways, Finn Balor. He's got that kind of makeup, that kind of shape. He's got the potential to bulk up, to look better, to get leaner, to look stronger. He's 19 years old. And in my opinion, he's already woefully underutilized, particularly at other brands. I don't mind saying it. Quality Wrestling Academy, which no question does some astonishing work. And I know you work for them as well. And that, frankly, in itself shows that it obviously knows what it's doing. But I see their cards, and I see Aaron Cruz, and I see a distinct lack of opportunities for Aaron Cruz. And that disappoints me a little bit, because in my opinion, he's the crown jewel of what they've achieved so far in that training regime. And this is a guy who's also not been afraid to step out of the mold slightly. He's gone to other professional wrestling academies, including Revolution Pro Wrestling, and he's looking to craft himself. He's already expressed an interest in working for places like WAW and stuff like that, going to different training schools, learning that thing. My critique of Aaron Cruz probably would be that he could hit harder than he does. I get the impression he's still trying to play nice a little bit with the veterans. And to be honest, they'll respect you more if you punch them in the mouth. And I think that's something we need to see, that mean streak in Aaron Cruz. Once he gets that, I think he's going to be a terrifying prospect for anyone. And the fact that he's got the potential of 20 to 30 years in this business is astonishing. He's a very talented young man, and we saw glimpses of that. And we also, I gotta say, I'm liking the more arrogant, more aggressive streak. I've noticed that Quality tends to dial it back a little bit. Maybe he's being too respectful of the trainers and people that have afforded him opportunities. But the CWP, he had no problem going up to some Malcolm in the audience and offering him out and making an example of him, and even calling him a filthy scummer, which is, Portsmouth, Southampton, you know how they work. It's an aggressive rivalry. It always will be. And whether you have an opinion on that or not, the reality is Cruz is very confident at CWP and very confident in his abilities. I think he has the potential, like you say, to maybe pick up a cruiserweight title or a middleweight title and then work his way through the field. Because let's not forget, a multitude of people who have held middleweight titles ended up having opportunities at bigger belts and also bigger matches. You mentioned Buff Daddy, of course, in the match with Bram, who is so sizable in comparison. But he was able to go out there and knock him off his game because he was so good and because he had the experience as a middleweight champion coming into that.
Now, there's an old adage in British wrestling that you only get better by wrestling better wrestlers. And something that CWP has always done since the very beginning is bring in the very best and also the greatest of all time into our ranks. So over the years, CWP has had the likes of James Mason. You know, it's had the likes of Johnny Storm. There are still that generation of great high flyers that are on the scene. I would love CWP to bring in the likes of Jody Fleisch. Put Jody Fleisch against Aaron Cruz. Really test Aaron Cruz to the limit. See just how good he could be against someone who's been doing it for 15, 20 years. There's some great high flyers just in the local scene as well. I would love to see, this is kind of an honorable mention, we'll call it an honorable mention, Ziggy Strange. Ziggy Strange wrestled for Kapow Wrestling, recently made a couple of appearances at their Portsmouth shows. And Ziggy Strange, in my opinion, has got that kind of daredevil mentality of a young Will Ospreay. In the early days of Will Ospreay, before he put on the bulk and became a heavyweight champion, this is the guy who would do your triple back somersault off the top rope. Ziggy Strange is a professional parkour expert. So for him, running the ropes, triple back somersault, that comes totally naturally to him. So to put someone with that level of high-flying skill against Aaron Cruz, you're just going to up the game of both wrestlers. So, you know, maybe it's time. Make, you know, CWP's cruiserweight division, you know, world leading.
Yeah, and my final thought to that is that Aaron Cruz has now brought Cameron Anderson in tow. They've chosen to align themselves. We mentioned this briefly, very briefly in the last podcast. Tag team division. They've announced that they're interested in tag team gold. So, you know, pretty much off the back of my aggressive stance on tag team wrestling at the last show, there seems to have been, you know, I don't know if that might have jolted people into gear, or maybe it's just acted as an inspiration, or maybe it's nothing to do with what I've said at all. And they always had that plan. And in which case, that's even better, in my opinion. But the idea that we have the knobs and we now have the potential of bromance, as I believe they like to call themselves. I've seen their social media, so there's no hiding away from it. They've been posting photos. They've had photos done together as well. So they're obviously very serious about what they want to do. All of a sudden, our tag team division has gone from a joke to being legitimately one of the most in-depth and viable tag team divisions in all of the United Kingdom, which is excellent because we need to have depth in every division, as you've alluded to with the women's and the middleweight and things of that nature as well. Who's number two as we work our way very solidly towards the end of a very spectacular list?
Right. My number two is an interesting one. This is someone who has not yet appeared in CWP. Since the end of lockdown, since the rebirth of British wrestling, there has been one wrestler who made an appearance at my first show back with Kapow down in Portsmouth. And all of a sudden, his face has appeared on every poster that I have seen up and down the country. And that man is Bullet. Bullit. Bullet apparently has been training for quite a while, but he came along with Doug Williams at the show that I was on. I'd never seen him before, but when I said, oh, so let me just take down your name. This is Bullit, Bullit. Make sure you spell it right. I was like, it's very strange. I'm an MC. I'm going to speak it, but I'm glad that I wrote it down because I saw those words, those letters everywhere. Now, if you haven't seen Bullet before, he looks like the current brand of wrestling. He's kind of got a look of an Uso, of a Roman Reigns type, but he's also got the size. He's got the size of like a Keith Lee almost. But this is a guy who comes out and he is super professional, super hard hitting, and full of intensity. I've seen him work heel. I've seen him work face. In my opinion, Bullet is the next big thing in British wrestling. And down the line, when we need new contenders for the heavyweight championship, I think Bullet could be a contender for the heavyweight championship before the end of 2022. And if you don't sign him before the end of 2022, he's just going to go somewhere bigger and better. So if you haven't seen Bullet yet, check out online. He's had matches against Simon Miller from What Culture. He's recently in a feud with Doug Williams. He's a chap who is going to be appearing literally every show around the country. Have a look. You'll see him. He'll be on the poster. He'll be there front and center because he looks great on a poster. As I say, he feels like an amalgamation of all of current wrestling in one wrestler. And in my opinion, 2022 is the breakout year for Bullet.
I haven't seen Bullet, which is a surprise because you know me, I've seen pretty much everybody at this point, and that's thrilling to me because there's always something new to learn. And very much like wrestling, learning as a wrestler and, you know, working in every trade in this business as I do, you have to understand that there is always going to be something bigger, something better. There's always an improvement. There's always an opportunity for evolution. You know, error margins, they grow if you decide to stay at the level you are. And Bullet, all I ever hear about when he's mentioned is how special he is. So I look forward to the possibility of someone like that coming in, because I think that this roster is starting to garner a bit more of a meaty Hoss mentality, which I'm all for. Is midgets just don't get the job done, as far as I'm concerned. But I will allow Aaron Cruz and Cameron Anderson, of course, a little bit of leeway because they are my boys and they travel well, and I respect those boys tremendously. Now, sticking with somebody who isn't as well known as CWP, but will be from the last show, international prospect. I had to mention this kid, Jake Hollister. I think you have to break the balance a little bit sometimes to really make a statement in wrestling. And you have to push hard and work. Like, you know, we made a concerted effort to bring in Franco Varga, who for me was probably the shining star of Reborn, at least in my opinion. You know, picking up a win over Joel Redmond is spectacular enough, but also having the nerve to go out there and dump Jackson Arrow on his ass as he did during the Rumble was tremendous to see, although, of course, Joel Redmond did chase him off and then was immediately eliminated by the hardest man in Bournemouth, who, let's be real, he took him from behind. Like, I don't like many people, but I'll still smack him in the face, not in the ass. Come on, do better, sunshine. But Jake Hollister, I could not get over how impressive he was. Jake Hollister, the night before Reborn, some people might not realize, had wrestled Jody Fleisch, the king of cruiserweights in the UK. It's basically him and Johnny Storm, 1 and 2 to many people. I would give the edge to Jody, and I think Jody is always recreating himself. He still looks like he did when he was 20, which is obscene, you know, as the guy barrels into the 40s and you'd never know it. He has aged beautifully. Well done, sir. But for me, Jake Hollister, the talent, the level of composure and professionalism, and that, of course, stems from the fact that, let's be real, the American circuit's bigger. It may not necessarily be better, but it's bigger and it's more difficult to push through. It's more difficult to shine in that circuit because there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of places that could be up for grabs that need to be battled over. And there's hundreds of thousands more looking to take those spots. Jake Hollister, I've noticed, will be wrestling, I believe it's Max Holiday from MLW, or Mike Holiday, excuse me. You know, he's really starting to make a name for himself. I've noticed he's starting to appear on posters with the likes of EC3 and Jordan Grace and Franco Varga on there. And you think, whoa, he was on our show and he was a relative unknown, particularly to the UK audience. And now all of a sudden, the kid is blowing up. And this UK tour seems to have given him that final jab to say, off you go. You're going to be a megastar now. Even Franco said, that's it. I've done what I can. Anyone who watched the podcast that he did with WrestlePlug so graciously, he gave so much of his time. He spoke so glowingly about Jake, and he said, there's not more, you know, there's nothing more I can do for Jake. At this point, it's all about what he can do. And obviously, he's taken that very seriously. Brand new merch, brand new ring gear, brand new attitude. He's even growing a goatee and looking very handsome with it. Well done, sir. But he is scary in terms of potential. I think he could be a megastar, and he's another guy I can pretty much guarantee will be in AEW or Impact or WWE before you can blink an eye.
About 6 years ago, I went to a show at a leisure centre in Portsmouth for Rev Pro. It was mainly trainees on the show, but there were a couple of imports as well. The match before the interval, featured a young American wrestler by the name of Ricochet. He hadn't broken out at that time. He was just another guy who they brought over to do some flips. Within the space of a year, him and Will Ospreay had broken the internet, and within 2 years, he was on NXT. If the timing is right, if your face fits, if you've got the talent, this business can fly incredibly quickly. And the kind of person who was part of a multi-man scramble at CWP can become a household name, which is why you've got to support grassroots wrestling, because you never know who the next big star is going to be.
Yeah. I mean, you can see Jake Hollister's work. Quick run in the Rumble as well, and was very effective in that as well. That has to be said. Was unfortunately, let's be fair, he was assaulted by an unruly gang of knobs. Unnecessary, but it is what it is. And hey, it's every man for himself. But why not take the advantage of the faction while you got it? It's as simple as that. And nothing says we have domination like 3 knobs instead of 1, bundling you into a corner. Yikes. The ultimate thing for me, though, is who, I've been curious about this. We've known for a while we're going to record this podcast. And for me, I'm sitting here thinking, man, Martin Rowe is an intelligent man. He's a dear friend. Who could he possibly think is the most crucial and most likely breakout star for CWP in 2022?
Big money Bobby Vegas. This is his year. 2021 was an incredible year for Bobby Vegas. This was a guy who over lockdown, we've discussed this on the podcast before. Over lockdown, he got up his cardio. He dropped his weight. He focused on becoming the very best Bobby Vegas that he could be. And right now, he is on the cusp of greatness. Much like Bullet, he's another British heavyweight who is getting booked everywhere. He can be a good guy, he can be a bad guy, but right now, he's the guy. He's your number 1 contender. At the next show, Bobby Vegas versus the Prince of Mumbai, Rishi Ghosh. This one is British wrestling gold waiting to happen. And we can hope that he becomes the champion, because he won't just be a champion, in name. This is a guy who will hold that gold everywhere he goes. He will carry that belt down to the shops because he wants the world to know that he's the greatest. If he can beat the Prince of Mumbai, arguably the most devious wrestler in British wrestling history. This is a guy who runs his own wrestling school. He doesn't just know every trick in the book, he literally published the book. So, if Bobby Vegas can get past the Prince of Mumbai at the next CWP Super Show, then there's your man. There is your next superstar of British wrestling. So you talk about Franco Varga being the Queen's favorite wrestler. I think she'll have a new favorite if Bobby can be successful.
It's the perfect choice because he is, like you say, the number 1 contender. He's showing, he wrestled an incredibly intense and aggressive 20-minute match against the most dangerous entity CWP has ever had in Eddie Kenway and took him to the limit, while also deflecting the attentions of Rudy Root and Roderick Rambunctious. He then comes out and spends a good 15 to 20 minutes walloping bodies around, and you really saw the confidence flow out of him. And this is a guy who eliminated 6'6", 400-pound Leviathan Max Carnage, picked him up off his feet, deadlifted him, and then was able to throw him over the top at the other side of the ring as well. Not to mention posthumously dumping out Danny Disorder like the little piece of garbage that he is, and basically proclaiming to the world, I'm the hardest man in Southampton. And you know what? Who else is going to argue that point? Big money, like he said, it's not just a catchphrase. And it's not just about the number in your bank account. It's about what's in here. And he has proven that more than anyone else. And honestly, every day I go on my social media, he is in a new match graphic, a new poster, a new card, a new promotion against the world's best. He just wrestled and I believe beat Doug Williams for the All Nations Championship in SWF and come up. Jesus, holy hell. Like, that's, you don't, most of us will never get to wrestle Doug Williams. I did a seminar with Doug Williams. Okay. And he was very complimentary of me as a, a person. He said, you've got good size and that. But he said, you've got a long way to go. Bobby Vegas went out there and dismantled him. This is one of the greatest wrestlers Europe has ever produced. Doug Williams is up here with all of your World of Sport legends. He's up here with Giant Haystacks and Big Daddy and guys of that nature, with Robbie Brookside, with Fit Finney, with William Regal. He's that good. And Bobby Vegas went out there and frankly abused him somewhat. And he's working everywhere, a multitude of titles, a multitude of opportunities. And of course, there's also the fact that Big Money Bobby Vegas is a truly inspiring, charismatic individual. You might have seen, he does stand-up. He's a businessman. He has alter egos. He has times where he drifts into a different mentality and plays some, womble with a funky looking hairdo and still causes damage. You think, what the? It's astonishing. His range, I've never seen anything like it. For me, he could potentially be an all-time legend of British wrestling with that mentality. And he's on his way, and seeing him dethrone someone like a Doug Williams only proves that point further, as far as I'm concerned. Sky's the limit. Now, obviously, I did mention Aaron Cruz was my number one, so to say, and he will be in my heart for so long, bless him. He's basically my son, as everybody knows. And we're all very proud of him here at House Knicks. But I did have another individual in mind, and it will stun people a little bit, but I love stirring the pot. But I like being honest too, as you know. And this individual's already been mentioned somewhat because he's part of the faction. I've actually got Ebenezer the Geezer down at number 2. And obviously we'll finish with him, or finish with Aplomb. We might have some honorary mentions as well. The reason I have him here is because, okay, he's not the biggest guy. He's certainly not the most muscular. But nobody entertained and excited like Ebenezer the Geezer. You were right there, making that announcement for that dirty 24/7. And by the way, he caught an astonishing amount of controversy with his mouth and with his actions in the ring. And I'm all for that too, because sometimes you got to rock the boat to get it to ride in the sea. And that's exactly what he's done here. You really do have to upset a lot of people sometimes to make a change. And as everybody knows, you don't get to be a revolutionary without being the focal point. So for me, Ebenezer the Geezer has the potential in terms of just character alone, but he's also quite dangerous in the ring. We saw that. He can handle himself and he can take to the skies. He pulled off arguably the move of the night with his somersault plancher, corkscrew plancher over the top rope, and wiped out an entire field. Not only that, he wiped out a veteran like Frankie T. Like, it was just nothing, like nothing. I think he genuinely has the potential, if he can get out of his own way slightly, to be one of the biggest stars in Britain. And it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up running into a Bobby Vegas along the way quite a bit, because Bobby Vegas has shown himself to be, in some places, a little bit more upstanding. He keeps, his mentality changes, and it does, doesn't it? We all sometimes feel like we're the bad guy, and sometimes we feel like we're the good guy. But Bobby Vegas and Ebenezer the Geezer, for me, is almost one of the underrated clashes that everyone doesn't realize they want until they get it. Ebenezer the Geezer.
How about Ebenezer challenging Eddie Kenway, No Limits?
Yeah, now, see, on paper, people are thinking, are you mad? Are you crazy, Martin Rowe? Just incredulous affair that this could be. He could genuinely be slaughtered. However, it's the mental game. It's that mentality, pack mentality as well. Now, first of all, if we're really delving into our fantasy booking chart here, Eddie Kenway is friends with Ebenezer the Geezer. He likes the nod. Is he going to take it easy? Is he going to be slightly thrown aback? Is he going to be able to maintain his vicious streak when it's actually someone that he can at least, stand up to, or at least deal with to a certain extent. He can tolerate Ebenezer the Geezer, and trust me, Eddie Kenway can't tolerate many people without murdering them. He literally will skin you alive if he thinks you are unnecessary to his plans. But also it's that wily instinct. And let's not forget, Ebenezer Geezer trained with some of the best wrestlers in this country, the likes of people like KM Lane and the Bone Brothers. This is a guy who is a champion for Berkshire Championship Wrestling. This is a guy who is now starting to get the attention that he deserves. And he works a number of shows and he always puts himself out there. And the thing about him is that he's not afraid to go and work for smaller places. He's not afraid to get a little bit more grubby, as you would expect from a knob. He is quite happy to get his hands dirty and work wherever he needs to work. He's one of those guys. He'll accumulate all of his wealth with the tiny little profits here and there. Some guys, they go straight for the big paydays or command them, like a Bobby Vegas is starting to do. He'll pick up all the tiny change and he'll create a small empire of his own just from that. There's a great deal of potential there, and no limits means you can do whatever you please. Ebenezer Geezer has proven on several occasions he's willing to push much further than anyone else will. He'll do anything, literally anything, to incite a riot. And in some ways, I think our fans kind of like that because they were very much taken by the knobs at Reborn.
So I think that is both of our top fives. But let's throw in one bonus. Make your pick. Who, over the last year, we've seen a lot of top stars lose their jobs, sadly. There's been a lot of cuts at WWE, which means there's suddenly a lot of free agents. Who, fantasy booking, would you like to see come into CWP? Because I've already made my decision. I think that in the land of the meaty hoss fights, I would like in 2022 to see Big Damo come to charity wrestling. The former Killian Dane making his way through the ropes.
Yeah, see, the potential there is scary because you'll know, because in February, Eric Young is announced for a UK tour. Former member of Sanity himself. Imagine if he brings Killian Dane in tow with him. But you mentioned meaty hosses that currently aren't employed by a mainstream company. Well, there's only one for me. It's a dream opponent in the sense of he'll murder me, but you got to have it on your bucket list. It's Keith Lee. Keith Lee in CWP is just, that's fantasy booking at its finest. However, potentially, genuine potential, Eric Young could be a legitimate thing. I know that IWE have been courting the prospect of an Eric Young. I know that a multitude of companies around us have been courting him and the prospect of him because his agent is obviously top dollar, and he would be. And he said, hey, if you're happy to all split the bill, I'll get Eric Young on as many cards as we possibly can. I know Eric Young as well, enough to know that he will work anywhere where there is somebody he can kick the everlasting bejesus out of. He likes that. And he is, don't be fooled by the size in terms of height, because stature-wise and build-wise, he is shredded. He looks like a statue in many ways, and he's more vicious. You can forget, Varner by Design as well in Impact. He just has a real vicious ruthlessness that I don't think anyone on the CWP roster could potentially be ready for. But there's a lot of talent out there. I think Damo's a magnificent shout. He was trained down in our region, in our neck of the woods as well. He helped train Psycho Phillips at Rev Pro. I went to see Damo's last ever Rev Pro match where he wrestled Psycho Phillips before he left for NXT. And I thought he genuinely could have been a massive deal. Remember at WrestleMania in that Battle Royal, he had such a massive run and we couldn't believe it. Someone who was so close to us personally, all of a sudden on the grandest stage in wrestling history. I love that idea. But for me, I think fantasy-wise, you can't look past Keith Lee. How about Keith Lee versus Big Damo in the ultimate exhibition match for CWP? I keep hearing people say, CWP doesn't use proper wrestlers. It doesn't use proper talent. I'm going to go on Facebook and have a little cry to my big, bulky friends. Okay, cool. You do that. But in the world of adults, CWP books great matches. Franco Varga versus Joel Redman, by the way, barreling towards 2,000 views on YouTube. Not bad. Not bad. And someone like a Keith Lee or a Killian Dane, better known as Big Damo to us, could certainly put a CWP card over the top.
Do you know what? I think we could do a whole podcast fantasy booking the next 5 years of CWP. Maybe that's something for another time.
Yeah, I'll stick that one in the pocket, sir. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll leave it there. We've given you a lot of great content. Hopefully you've enjoyed this concept. But most importantly, there's a reason why. It's a nice little window underneath this glorious video. And you can leave your comments. You can have your opinion, and it's unfiltered. So why not tell us underneath who you think is going to be a breakout star, who you want to be a breakout star, who do you think has been overlooked in this video? Maybe you think, hang about, what about Cameron Anderson? What about a sensational Simon Durden, who I personally have a lot of love for? Maybe you want to zone in on an individual and a faction or anything beyond. Now is your opportunity, because at CWP, you get to have a say. We don't just talk about giving fans a say. They always have a say. We also have a general discussion forum you can check out on Facebook. If you look for that, it's CWP Discussion Forum. That's available to you as well. Do not hesitate to check that out. You can get it via the link on the main Facebook page for CWP as well. And of course, social media at CWP Charity across the board. You can find us easy as pie, no nonsense, at CWP Charity. Help us to help others, as we like to say. Magic Martin Rowe, thank you very much for joining us for a stellar podcast. I look forward to having you on more regularly, sir.
I look forward to being back. Whatever you celebrate, have a very happy holidays, and don't drink too much.
Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen. This will be out before Christmas, so you can enjoy it over the Christmas period. And like we say, it's not always an easy time of year for people. I myself personally went through a lot of strife many years ago through Christmas, an unfortunate incident in my life. So I understand what it's like, and I am more than happy to express an open book for people to come and speak to me confidentially and privately and just have a shoulder to cry on. And I'm sure that that is a sentiment that is echoed throughout CWP's roster and its social media and management. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful Christmas, and we will catch you very soon for a lot more content presented by the WrestlePlug, but most importantly, brought to CWP Charity Wrestling Promotion.